Aloha koko, that's how we say good morning or hello everyone in Hawaii. My name is Avi Penhollow, and I am not a Kanaka, I'm not Hawaiian. I'm a haole, which we would consider a foreigner, which really means nowadays is white person. Living in Oahu for the last 4 years, teaching in a Hawaiian-focused charter school called Kamaile Academy. And today I want to talk briefly with you. There's so much, and I appreciate the previous speakers because they kind of lay out this parallel universe that we live in over in the islands and also in the South Pacific. I want to talk to you about two concepts. One is called mo'olelo, and the next is makawalu. Mo'olelo simply means it's a storytelling, and it's how Native Hawaiians kept their oral traditions and histories, along with hula, oli, which is chant, which I'll share with you one of the chants that we do, I do every time I welcome the students into the classroom. They line up outside of the classroom and they will chant in Hawaiian for permission to enter into the space of learning. So before I do, I want to just take a minute to also acknowledge that currently on Mauna Kea, which is the most sacred mountain for Kanaka in Hawaii, they have been there now for 130 or 31 days, occupying the service road that goes up to the summit of Mauna Kea, where the state is currently trying to build a 30-meter telescope. And so there's so many parallels that I appreciate even being here to talk about. So I like to say that it's their version of Standing Rock right now. This is not the first time. There are many telescopes already situated up on the top of Mauna Kea. And often this is portrayed, especially on the mainland, as anti-science, which is actually not the case for the Kanaka. So they have a lot in common and in solidarity with indigenous peoples. In fact, the Kanaka also came and had representatives at Standing Rock as well. E ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e ke Kanaka e komo maloko e hanga e hewa I kawaha e no kla o ka eo a leo wale noe. And so after that chant, the students come inside and they're acknowledging as they come in that they're ready to be inside. And most of my students spend most of their life outside. So I resonate with some of the other things too. But when most people think about Hawaii, they are thinking about this. They are thinking, and this is actually the beach, Makaha Beach, which I actually lived on for the first 3 years I was there. And so when I tell my colleagues on the mainland that I live in Hawaii, they think, oh, you're a teacher in paradise. And often these are conjured up, of course, by Hawaii, by commodification of Hawaiian culture and the tourism industry in Waikiki. But that is not where I live. That beach is where I live. But right near that beach is the largest homeless encampment in the United States. They prefer not to be called homeless, by the way. They are houseless. The land, they belong to the Aina, the land. And so, but what is Hawaiian culture-based education? It's based primarily on cultural responsive models, but it's not exactly the same. But it's focusing on place-based learning and so their connection to their local environment and also including local literature. But we have the same shared parallel history as Native Americans, and that is what I would want to convey more than anything else, is that there used to be close to 800,000 Kanaka residing in the island chain. That number was drastically reduced, of course, when the colonizers came in 1778 with Captain James Cook. And so in my view, I am a guest in another country. I live in an illegally occupied kingdom of Hawaii, which was overthrown with the help of the US military in 1893. This sign actually is, if you go on a hike right near my school, it's still used for military operations, and so sometimes when we were teaching, we can hear the bombs going off right around the mountain range. And all of this, of course, is deeply part of the historical trauma that continues to play out. So I live in Waianae. I have my cap over there to represent my students there. They're very proud Hawaiians. It's the largest Hawaiian population in Hawaii is on the west side of Oahu, very far from Waikiki. In fact, tourists are often told not to go there at all. And so what is this holiday doing there? I researched before I actually went to Hawaii, and I chose this school on purpose because of my background in critical pedagogy and working with what are called marginalized communities. I started off in Los Angeles at facility schools, working with the kids, kicked out of LAUSD. It was residential treatment facilities. I went on to, 10 years later, to Denver, Colorado, same thing. My last school in Denver was a mental health facility for students with chronic homicidal or suicidal ideation. So all of these sort of trauma-informed care things were following me along and developing who I am as a teacher and what I would consider as a culture worker. But there's so much I would want to tell you about Waianae, and this time does not allow. But like I said, we live next to the largest homeless encampment, and many of my students do come from this camp. So it's right in our neighborhood, and so there are all kinds of challenges, of course, that come with having such a large homeless population in your school. They're used to being outside, hunting, pig hunting, fishing, surfing, all these things. I would say as a teacher, the greatest moments of connecting and relationships are done in the water. So I surf when I see them. That's where it all takes place and happens. So I like to call this kind of critical holiday pedagogy in the sense that as a teacher who is not Native, how do we indigenize education, and how can we be authentic in indigenizing education? So the first thing I would say is that we have to always be asking critical questions of ourselves, of the environment, acknowledging the historical trauma, our own identity and positioning, and the key would be to be dialogical in Freire's words of reading the world and the word. Dialogical for me, primarily in this context, would mean listening. And so earning your place among the community and earning the trust of the students that you have. They're used to it being a revolving door of teachers who come from the mainland thinking they're gonna go grade papers with Mai Tais by the beach, and they have no idea what they're getting into. And so I think I was prepared prior to coming to Hawaii, just in the context that I've worked in before. And so you have to have an incredible amount of patience as well, but mostly it's about listening and doing your best to internalize the environment that's around with you so that you can have and find true solidarity with your students. Just a couple practical things. I'm not going to share lesson plans with you, but I am one who believes in definitely looking at the canon as a cultural artifact, and so introducing local literature into the curriculum. This is a book I'm teaching right now. It's called Written in the Sky by Matthew Kaupio, and it talks about so many things, but homelessness in Ala Moana Park in Honolulu. There's a lot of Hawaiian language, a lot of references to both the contemporary and the ancient and ancestral knowledge, and so the students are able to see themselves in the story. And so when I'm talking to teachers from the mainland, I'd say, what would it be like to always read stories that come from somewhere else, and not even on the same continent, and to be able to see yourselves in those stories is a rare thing. And so some of these authors are just incredible for that. I highly recommend these books. Kiana Davenport, House of Many Gods, actually takes place in Waianae, where I'm from. There's some beautiful descriptions I would love to read to you from there. Christiana Kahatawila, who I'm happy now to say that I've been friends with and teaching her short stories as well. these are very powerful narratives where the students are able to see the cultural conflicts that exist in their lives on day to day. Kids from Waianae, they call Honolulu town. It's only 26 miles away, but some of them have not even been there. And they do not understand. They see the images of Hawaii through social media and all those kinds of things. One of the most heartbreaking things I think I've ever seen was some of my students like to get on a video chat with kids all around the world and that sort of thing, and to hear some of the things that are said to them, you know, and you can just see their demeanor and everything. And so they're taught to be ashamed to be from Waianae. They're taught that this is the ghetto of Hawaii and that sort of thing. And so through place-based learning, I'm happy to say that in their ahupua'a, which is traditionally Hawaiian lands were divided like pie slices. And so they have access to the entire ecosystem from what we say makai to the sea, mountain to the sea. They have all the resources they need for sustainability. Some of those things are now coming back through local agriculture and farming. And so we do a lot of place-based learning that way. So inclusion of native and local literature. Don't have time to get into the actual process of what I do. Mo'olelo, I guess one of the things I would say is that we use critical literary lenses, and makawalu is a way of looking at texts, both canonical and not, through native eyes and through native perspective. We discover a lot of these things through Hawaiian core values. So instead of, for example, saying responsibility, I will use the word kuleana because it's more, it is indigenous and it's more internally understood, other than these Western forms of schooling that have been, they've been under for so long, and their own traumatic experiences of how they teach us, telling them that they speak broken English, and that their forms of wisdom are inferior. And that's all I have for you today. I'm going to leave you with a few questions on critical questions that I ask myself. Can English language arts really be indigenized, coming through the vehicle of the English language itself? And in what ways and these are questions that I will ask myself, in what ways do my current practices limit or empower Indigenous learner agency? And then the question that I will pose to students as well, in which Tommy Orange does a great job in his book, is what does it mean to be Indigenous in the first place in the modern world? And in what ways can culturally responsive classrooms address the conflicts of internalized colonization and urban Indigenous culture? Mahalo.